All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the life of Congressman Charlie Rangel. He was a giant figure for Harlem, for New York City, and for the entire nation. He fought for this country in the Korean War and dedicated his life to fighting for working families in our city and in our country. He was the first black chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and a force representing New York City in Congress for decades. I was honored to know him. His legacy will continue to live on in our city and within all of us who were influenced by him. Rest in power, Charlie, Lion of Lenox Avenue. This week is the final week of our executive budget hearings for fiscal year 2026. I want to thank all council members and staff for their hard work throughout this budget process thus far. A special thanks to our finance chair, Justin Brannon, for his leadership, committee chairs, and our finance division for their commitment throughout these weeks of hearings. To the members of the public who offered testimony, thank you so much for your continued engagement and sharing your input throughout this process to help us advance a better budget for our city. As we continue our negotiations with the mayoral administration, the council will push forward to secure a budget that addresses the needs of New Yorkers. There is still significant work to be done to fill the gaps in funding for programs left out of the executive budget. Throughout our hearings, we identified outstanding funding gaps and heard from New Yorkers across the city who rely on adequate city services to safely and successfully continue living in our city. We must ensure that New York City is a place where all our fellow neighbors, regardless of income, background, or experience, build healthy and productive lives. And lastly, in the absence of a mayor willing to vocally stand up for us, I want to clearly defend New York City and our city's families as we continue to be targeted by attacks from the Trump administration. We have faced unending assaults on our federal funding and our residents, despite New York being one of the nation's top contributors of taxes to the federal government. Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill recently passed in Congress cuts health care, food assistance, and education programs from New Yorkers and other Americans, and it would be a disaster if it advances into law. Today, and in the coming days, the Trump administration is expected to launch another attack on New York City for being a city that prioritizes our residents and public safety over Trump's harmful political agenda. We expect Trump to put a target on our city as one on his list of sanctuary cities and issue yet another executive order. But the evidence is clear. Areas of the country with sanctuary laws are safer and economically stronger, experiencing less crime and greater economic prosperity. And it's common sense. We are safer when residents are not afraid to work with local law enforcement to report or solve crime. Our city will always value our diversity and the working people who've built this city. As long as I am leader in City Hall, I will fight to serve and protect all New Yorkers. We recently learned of a student in our public school system, someone who followed the laws, was supporting his family and contributing to our city, unnecessarily detained by ICE. He has been disruptively separated from his family and trafficked from state to state by the Trump administration. This isn't about public safety at all. It does absolutely nothing to make any of us safer. In fact, it only creates fear in our communities that undermines public safety in our city. And yet, the mayor is so compromised that he can't find the courage or even the words to stand up for our city and New Yorkers. It is sad and it is dangerous. Let me be clear, though. New York City will not back down or cower to bullying tactics. It is important that the people of our city know that they have leaders who will stand up to bullies, and I will always fight for my fellow New Yorkers. That's what our city and residents deserve from those entrusted to represent them. Now let's move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following finance items. Introduction 1219, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, would establish the East Harlem 125th Street Business Improvement District in Manhattan. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan would establish that the interest rate be 16% per year for fiscal year 2026 for non-payment of taxes on properties with an assessed value of more than $450,000 or more than that per residential unit for cooperative apartments. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would establish that the interest rate be 9% per year for fiscal year 2026 for non-payment of taxes on properties with an assessed value of more than $250,000 but less than or equal to $450,000, or that range per residential unit for cooperative apartments. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would establish that the interest rate be 6% per year for fiscal year 2026 for non-payment of taxes on properties with an assessed value of less than $250,000 or less than that per residential unit for cooperative apartments. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would establish that the interest rate be 2.5% per year for fiscal year 2026 for certain properties for which the owner has entered into a payment installment agreement with the Department of Finance for payment of delinquent property taxes, assessments, or other charges. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would establish that the discount percentage for early payment of real estate taxes be set at 0.5% per year for fiscal year 2026. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan establishing a new 40-year Article 11 tax exemption and renewing Article 5 exemption for 3 lots in Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa's district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would approve an Article 11 exemption for 1 lot in Councilmember Keith Powers' district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan establishing a new 40-year Article 11 tax exemption for 1 lot in Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan's district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would approve an Article 11 tax exemption for 1 lot in Minority Leader Joanne Ariola's district. And a preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Brannan would approve the new designation and changes in the designation of certain organizations to receive funding in the expense budget. Next, we will vote on the following appointments. Stephen Chu, reappointed by the Mayor to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Angie Master, reappointed by the Mayor to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Stephen Wilder, appointed by the Mayor to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Erasmus Ipwembe, appointed by the Mayor to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Frank Mahal, appointed by the Mayor to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and Robert J. Firestone, appointed by the Mayor as President of the New York City Tax Commission. Next, we will vote on the following Home Rule resolutions. SLR 1 will amend the retirement and Social Security law to restore the 20-year service retirement for certain New York City correction officers and sanitation workers. SLR 2 will amend the retirement and Social Security law in relation to death benefits for active New York City Transit Authority workers. SLR 3 will amend the administrative code in relation to granting members of the NYPD eligibility for retirement and pension benefits based on previous service as traffic enforcement agents. And SLR 4 will amend the vehicle and traffic law in relation to owner liability for failure to comply with street cleaning parking rules. Next, we'll vote on the following land use items. 2510 Coney Island Avenue rezoning, a private application to facilitate a new 4-story mixed-use development with ground floor commercial space and approximately 28 housing units, 8 of which will be affordable under MIH Option 2 in Councilmember Ina Vernikoff's district. 19 Maspeth Avenue rezoning, a private application to facilitate the development of a new 6-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial space and 15 residential units, 4 to 5 of which will be affordable under MIH in Councilmember Jennifer Gutierrez's district. 2201 through 2227 Neptune Avenue rezoning, a private application to facilitate the development of a new 18-story mixed-use building with 145 housing units, 37 to 44 of which will be affordable under MIH in Councilmember Justin Brannan's district. And Atlantic Avenue mixed-use plan, a neighborhood plan in Councilmembers Hudson and Osei's districts that will deliver 4,600 new units of housing, approximately 1,900 of which will be permanently affordable. This will single-handedly produce more affordable housing in the area that has been constructed over the entire past decade. The project also includes over $215 million in newly committed funding for community investments and infrastructure. Through the negotiation process, the Council secured investments for increased services in Central Brooklyn, including for tenant and homeowner protections, streets and public realm improvements to improve traffic and quality of life, renovations of 6 neighborhood parks and playgrounds, improvements to local MTA subway stations, modernized infrastructure, and economic development opportunities. The Council is modifying the applications to require MIH Option 1. The Council's partnership with the Department of City Planning and community stakeholders, including Brooklyn Community Boards 3 and 8, represents a model of community planning and collaboration that can advance housing solutions and community investments that benefit all New Yorkers. This council has led on confronting the city's housing crisis, approving citywide zoning reforms, neighborhood rezonings, and individual land use applications that constitute 120,000 units of housing. The Atlantic Avenue mixed-use plan is the second neighborhood rezoning this council will be voting on. Combined with the Bronx Metro North station's rezoning, they will produce over 11,000 housing units. And there are more neighborhood rezonings in the pipeline. We know New Yorkers urgently need more affordable homes to stay in this city, and under the leadership of this council, we are delivering for our communities. Now, I invite Councilmember Crystal Hudson and Councilmember Chiose to discuss this monumental neighborhood plan.
You'll both be the same height.
Yeah.
Should I go?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. After more than a decade of advocacy, Central Brooklyn is finally getting the community-led rezoning it has long demanded. I'm proud to stand alongside my colleagues today as we vote to approve the Atlantic Avenue mixed-use plan, also known as AMUP. In my first year in office, I secured a commitment from the administration to create a comprehensive neighborhood plan for Atlantic Avenue. And now, after nearly 3 years of public engagement, hard work, and lively negotiations, we've reached an agreement that will bring 4,600 new homes to Central Brooklyn, 40% of which will be affordable for low and moderate income New Yorkers, along with more than $215 million in dedicated funding for infrastructure upgrades, park renovations, and more for our communities. AMUP directly tackles several major crises facing our city: a housing shortage, dangerous streets, and the urgent need for good-paying jobs accessible to all New Yorkers, regardless of education level. This plan delivers nearly 1,900 affordable homes for low and moderate income New Yorkers, including those who've experienced homelessness, a full redesign of one of Brooklyn's most dangerous corridors, $100 million in improvements to 6 local parks and playgrounds, funding for local hiring programs, as well as resources for tenant and homeowner protections, and more. This process shows what's possible when planning is led by the community and backed by political will. We can build more affordable housing and deliver real, lasting benefits to neighborhoods across the city. I'm grateful to the communities of Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and Bedford-Stuyvesant for envisioning a better future for Atlantic Avenue and a better future for all of us. And to the many city agencies who worked tirelessly to get us here, the Department of City Planning, Housing Preservation and Development, Transportation, Small Business Services, and Parks, thank you. And of course, to my partner in this work, Councilmember Chiose, who stood shoulder to shoulder with me throughout this process, and whose relentless advocacy and steadfast leadership helped get us across the finish line. I hope that AMUP is just the beginning and that more communities across our city begin the deep work of building consensus to bring about more affordable housing, safer streets, better parks, and stronger neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you.
And not to stand
Yeah,
here,
I want to get on the box.
Okay.
No, you can stay on the box. Well, first and foremost, so much to Councilmember Hudson for her partnership. I think this is 3 years in the making.
Absolutely.
And at the start of each meeting we had together, we introduced each other as short and sweet. I'll let you figure out who's short and who's sweet. But as Councilmember Hudson said, today we are passing a plan that truly meets the urgency of the moment. The Atlantic Avenue mixed-use plan, AMUP, will unlock 4,600 new homes across Community Board Districts 3 and 8. And as the speaker said, as well as Councilmember Hudson said, said, 1,900 of them will be income restricted. There are homes that will be as low as $800 a month for a studio and 3-bedroom apartments for as much as $1,200 a month, and that's right next to public transportation. This is a necessary and large amount of new homes and more income-restricted housing than this area has produced in the entire last decade. Through AMUP, 40% of units will be permanently income-restricted, and 100% will be adding to New York's desperately low housing supply, putting downward pressure on rents for everyone. Behind the necessary homes this plan unlocks, we have secured historic neighborhood investment totaling hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure and services. I want to thank the Speaker for her partnerships in this, my entire team, Councilmember Hudson, Council Land Use, for really showing that this council has taken great leadership in making a huge dent within our housing crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Today, we will also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Resolution 368A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, calls on the Congress to reintroduce and pass and the President to sign the Living Wage for Musicians Act. This legislation would establish a new streaming royalty to ensure fairer compensation for artists and musicians. Introduction 1207A, sponsored by Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa, would allow applicants for a high-pressure boiler engineer license to concurrently complete the 2-year apprenticeship program and 3-year practical experience requirements within the same 3-year time frame. I now invite Councilmember De La Rosa to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congrats to the colleagues on these amazing accomplishments. Intro 1207 is common sense change to the administrative code that would allow time spent in the New York State approved apprenticeship programs to count towards supervised practical experience required to obtain a high pressure boiler operating engineer license. Currently, applicants must first complete a 2-year apprenticeship and then add at least 3 more years of supervised experience operating high-pressure boilers, delaying their licensing process. As the chair of the Civil Service and Labor Committee, we've taken our colleagues on tours of various apprenticeship programs and have seen the level of instruction and the prioritization of safety and hands-on training that these workers have. Intro 1207 includes a supervised practical apprenticeship time under the guidance of our brothers and sisters in labor into a licensing requirement, bringing them into the workforce with the necessary experience at a competitive pace. Operating engineers are essential to running our energy systems in hospitals and are key to New York City's environmental progress. If we want to meet our climate goals in New York City, then we must bolster our union workforce to meet the demand of retrofits and green infrastructure. Our city also continues to face attrition challenges and vacancies across agencies, causing backlogs of projects and service delays. Intro 1207 bolsters the pool of engineers and removes unnecessary duplication of already proven practical experience. A strong pool of prepared, ready-to-work engineers are crucial to addressing the blockages and assisting our agencies in bringing New York City into the future. This is common sense legislation that basically puts the men and women of labor to work towards greening our infrastructure. I also want to take a moment to thank Councilmember Krishnan, who's not here, but was integral in us getting this done, and of course, the Union of Operating Engineers. Thank you.
Great bill. Thank you. Introduction 676A, sponsored by Majority Leader Amanda Farias, would require the Taxi and Limousine Commission, or TLC, to conduct a study on the challenges and opportunities related to increasing the use of electric for-hire vehicles and installing new charging infrastructure. I invite Majority Leader Farias to the podium to discuss her bill.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. What is time? Thank you all for being here. Today, I'm proud to stand in support of my legislation, Introduction 676, which is focused on one of the most urgent questions facing our transportation future. Are we ready to transition to electric for-hire vehicles? This bill ensures we're not just chasing electrification goals in theory, we're backing them up with the data and infrastructure planning needed to make them work in practice. Intro 676 requires the Taxi and Limousine Commission to conduct a comprehensive comprehensive study and submit annual reports on the use of electric for-hire vehicles and the infrastructure that supports them. That means information on how many EVs are on the road, where they're charging, whether those chargers are accessible and sufficient, and where the gaps are. It also includes cost comparisons, license data, utilization trends, and specific recommendations for expanding charging access based on driver home residences and trip patterns. For too long, conversations about electrification have skipped a crucial step: understanding what the city's current infrastructure can support and how we can develop that infrastructure to support the growing number of electric for-hire vehicles. This bill ensures we build a solid foundation, strong enough to handle the scale of transition that we're aiming for, so we don't leave drivers behind or make promises a city can't keep. Intro 676 is about planning ahead, identifying weaknesses before they become roadblocks, and making sure the city's investments match the needs on the ground. As we continue working towards modernizing our for-hire vehicle fleet, we need infrastructure that meets demand, policy that reflects real-world conditions, and transparency that keeps all of us accountable. I want to thank Speaker Adams and my council colleagues for their support, and I urge all New Yorkers to follow the progress of this critical legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduction 1037A, sponsored by Sandy Nurse, our council member, would require the owner of a multiple dwelling building with rent-stabilized units to post a sign stating that the building contains such units and providing information for how tenants can submit inquiries to New York State Homes and Community Renewal to find out if their units are rent-stabilized. I invite Councilmember Nurse to discuss her legislation.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. Good afternoon, everyone. Intro 1037, I'm calling it the Rent Transparency Act, is pretty simple. It's going to require all buildings that are subject to rent stabilization laws to post signage in the common area to basically alert tenants that there's one or more rent stabilized units in the building and how they can find out if they're in one of them. It's also going to be in Spanish and English. And this bill really comes from my own lived experience. When in 2021, I moved into a building, I was repeatedly told by the landlord and the broker it's not rent stabilized. Turned out it was. I found out that information months and months later. And in the 3 lease renewals that I've gone through, I've had to fight the landlord every single time who claims the building is not rent stabilized. So I'm a council member. I'm fully educated about housing laws, but most New Yorkers aren't. There's 2.5 million rent stabilized tenants out there that are always at risk, that are always facing illegal rent hikes, harassment, and who are trying to fight off eviction. And so this bill is really meant to be an opportunity to get educated about your status, get empowered, and take action. If you know that your unit is stabilized, you can take action to fight overcharge hikes. There was actually a viral TikTok video from a couple of years ago where a woman was telling people how they could find out their rental history. And after that video, that office of Homes and Community Renewal got rental requests increase all the time. They went from getting about 500 in 2020 to about over 900 in 2024. And that's just the complaints that were filed after people found out they were being overcharged. So the goal of this bill is really to help people understand their status, work to preserve these units for those who are moving into these buildings who aren't from New York and don't know what a typical rent-stabilized unit looks like. We want to try to preserve these units and keep folks in their homes. So thank you so much, Speaker Adams and everyone else who worked on this, and I hope my colleagues vote for it today.
Right. Knocking them out of the park today with these great bills. Introduction 412A, sponsored by Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, would require Correctional Health Services, or CHS, to seek authorization from an individual in custody of the Department of Correction to contact their attorney of record and emergency contacts if the individual attempts suicide, is hospitalized, or is seriously injured. CHS would be required to notify parties authorized by the individual to receive this information within 3 hours of CHS confirming the suicide attempt, determining that hospitalization is is necessary or evaluating that an injury is serious with limited exception. I invite Councilmember Ressler to the podium to discuss his legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just firstly want to thank the Speaker for her deep commitment to making our correctional system more fair, more functional, more accountable. In this legislation, this bill is a part of that. I also just want to thank Chair Nurse and the Freedom Agenda in particular for their help and partnership in crafting this bill. Last year, there were about 1,000 incidents, violent incidents at Rikers Island that resulted in a serious injury. So about 3 times a day, somebody's getting seriously injured in our correctional system. And there is no mechanism to consistently inform the loved ones, the emergency contact, the attorney of those individuals. So you may find out when another person in custody informs somebody else who, through a game of telephone. That's wrong. It is frankly despicable. Since the Nunez Monitor came into place about a decade ago, we've seen slashings and stabbings quadruple. Rikers gets more violent all the time. And now, with this legislation, we will ensure that when somebody is seriously hurt, when they suffer a traumatic injury, the Correctional Health Service is required to contact the emergency contact that's designated by the detainee and their attorney in real time, hours later, so that family members and loved ones and their legal representative can advocate for their well-being and ensure their health and safety. We shouldn't need to pass legislation like this, but Rikers Island, as we know, is a humanitarian disaster. It is a dumpster fire. It is a hellhole. It is a stain on our city's conscience that it still persists and get worse and worse and worse with every passing year. And so we have to do more and do better to ensure that the people who are there have their basic rights looked out for. This bill is a step in that direction. Thank you so much to my colleagues and especially the Speaker for their support.
Thank you. Introduction 1148A, sponsored by Councilmember Tiffany Caban, would require the Department of Social Services, or DSS, to provide an application confirmation notice and document receipts to any applicant for cash assistance or SNAP benefits. DSS would also be required to make an electronic copy of submitted documents available. I invite Councilmember Caban to the podium to discuss her bill.
Thank you. The lights are extra bright today. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my colleagues. This legislation marks an important step toward greater transparency, accountability, and trust in our city's public benefit system. The Receipts Act ensures, like was mentioned, that applicants for key benefits like cash assistance, one-shot deals, and food stamps receive an application confirmation notice when they apply. This notice will indicate whether their application is complete, and if not, what steps remain. It also requires that applicants receive a detailed receipt after submitting documents, including the date, the type of documents, and the purpose of the submission. These may seem like minor procedural updates, but for those seeking vital support, they can mean the difference between clarity and confusion, between getting help and falling through the cracks. For too long, navigating public benefits has been a frustrating and opaque process. Applicants are often left without documentation of their status, and this bill tackles the issue with clear, common-sense solutions. And it was crafted to serve and uplift New Yorkers by my Constituent Services Director, Melissa Correa, and my Legislative Director, Jonah Birch. Chronic underfunding and understaffing at agencies like DSS have left too many New Yorkers struggling to access life-saving services during times of need. And the Receipts Act is about restoring dignity to a system that has left many feeling powerless. It ensures people have the tools to advocate for themselves and ensures that the government serves New Yorkers better. I thank the advocates, service providers, and New Yorkers who shared their stories and made clear how urgently this change was needed. I also want to thank, again, my Legislative Director, Jonah Birch, my Director of Constituent Services, Melissa Correa, for their hard work on this bill. And I also want to thank the Constituent Service Directors and teams of every single council office in this city, because they really informed this legislation and work so closally with our constituents in getting the help that they need every day. I look forward to working with DSS and HRA to implement the legislation effectively and thoughtfully. And together we can ensure the Receipts Act fulfills its promise, a benefit system that better serves the people. So thank you.
Thank you. Introduction 905A, sponsored by Councilmember Julie Won, would establish a 6-month pilot program to evaluate food quality feedback surveys for city food service contracts valued at $1 million or more. Participating agencies would post their findings online within 30 days after the pilot concludes, and the Office of Food Policy would evaluate the program's effectiveness and make recommendations for future feedback initiatives. I invite Councilmember Won to discuss her legislation.
Thank you so much, Speaker Adams. According to the Mayor's Office of Food Policy, the city spends about $500 million. That's $500 million annually on food across all city agencies, from schools, public hospitals, and senior centers. Last year, we had 2 hearings joint with EDC, and what we found, especially in the news, that as you've read, in one site alone by DocGo, an investigation found that they were wasting $39,000 worth of meals paid by taxpayer dollars every single day. Having no experience in providing meals and ignoring consumer feedback, more than 5,000 inedible meals were discarded on the daily, and the quality of the food did not change until the end of that termination of that contract. That is despicable. This money alone, if we were to salvage the $500 million in food waste, could probably fill the gaps for federal funding, such as the ACS vouchers that are at risk right now. But instead, $500 million are being thrown away at the expense of those who are hungry. My bill, Intro 905A, will establish a 6-month pilot program for food quality feedback surveys from food service vendors with contracts valued at $1 million or more. This pilot program allows us to evaluate the quality of food served in our shelters and in our schools, senior centers, and wherever else the government is providing food. The survey's findings will hold city agencies accountable, as well as the contractors, to identify and address food quality issues that we've heard of in our hearings, such as rotten food, inadequate malnutrition value, as well as inedible food that we have physically been served in our shelters as well as in our offices. This bill is important because now we're going to have standardized, anonymous food quality feedback surveys for our shelter residents, as well as schools, hospitals, wherever it may be, creating a mechanism for consumer voices to be heard and for the feedback to inform our oversight and accountability. This pilot will help us uncover where quality is breaking down, and these results will be posted on participating city agency websites, ensuring transparency as well as public accountability. Most importantly, we will have food quality feedback per location, per site, and vendor, so that we can stop doing business with bad vendors who are feeding us bad food. This is a significant investment of our public dollars, and we should ensure that these funds are providing food that is safe, nutritious, culturally and religiously appropriate. No New Yorker should be served moldy meals or food that fails to meet basic nutritional standards. The pilot program is a necessary step forward to establishing stronger oversight and long-term improvements in quality food control across our city. We cannot live like this anymore. We look forward to using these findings of this pilot, and so that we can chart a better path forward to keep everybody full and happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. A good one. And finally, in her absence, Introduction 1067B, sponsored by Councilmember Natasha Williams. This is one near and dear to my heart. Would require the existing Southeast Queens flood mitigation plan to incorporate updates on any New York City groundwater studies. The bill would also create an interagency task force to recommend changes to policies with regard to Southeast Queens flooding adaptation assistance. This task force would be required to publish 5 annual reports detailing their recommendations, and DEP would be required to administer a partnership program to facilitate information sharing regarding flooding conditions and sewer infrastructure with organizations that provide flood adaptation assistance to New York City homeowners. And we thank Councilmember Williams for this legislation. That concludes our stated agenda. With that, we will take on topic questions first. The bills are that good. They're great bills. Cool. Okay. You all don't have to stay if you don't want to.
You sure?
Hi, Courtney.
Cuomo proposed this morning a $20 minimum wage that he said he would implement by 2027. Curious your thoughts on that and whether or not you think that the minimum wage should be increased in New York City.
Well, I absolutely do think the minimum wage should be increased in New York City. It's interesting because it seems like the more Andrew Cuomo doesn't like what he didn't like, now he likes what he likes. Now that he's running, it seems like he'll say anything to get elected at this point. But when there was the opportunity to actually do something when he was in power, there was actually a barrier there. So he actually put a barrier there, and it did not happen for New York City. So it's interesting that it's happening now that he's on the campaign trail for mayor. Hi.
There was just a big rally going on outside in response to NYPD's recent criminalization of cycling infractions, something that delivery workers feel is targeting them. I've heard from council members somewhere at the rally that say they don't support this and that they're looking into a legislative response. Streets Blog heard from your office that you don't support it and that discussions remain ongoing about the response. That was on May 13th. What's the holdup? I mean, is there going to be some sort of response from the council?
Discussions are vital when it comes to any legislation put before this council. Discussions are ongoing because there are many, many points of view, be they positive or not. So we will continue to discuss this very important subject. Many of us do feel very strongly about it, and discussions will go on as appropriate.
Can you clarify your feelings on it? I mean, do you support this escalation to criminal summonses?
I don't think that there is any value to criminalizing cyclists who are cycling lawfully.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
I wonder what you make of Mayor Adams's involvement over the past couple of weeks in crypto summits. And today just a few minutes ago, he was speaking in Las Vegas about pushing forward some reforms, I think mostly in Albany, to make it easier for crypto companies to come to the city. Last week, he also hosted a crypto summit at Gracie Mansion. What do you make of all this?
I don't quite know. And as far as the trip is concerned, I really don't see how the trip benefits the city, but the mayor's free to travel wherever he wants to. So I'd be interested to know long term what this is actually all about.
I appreciate it.
Look at you, just asking to volunteer. He didn't raise his hand, but since we like you so much, Mr. Ford, no, you're here. And it's good to see you in the Red Room, by the way. It's great to see you in the Red Room. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If we could just possibly grab Council Member Hudson and
You got it. Thank you all very much.
anything else? Thank you all.
Cool.